Today, I'm glad to welcome Secretary McDonough to his first hearing with the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. When President Biden announced your nomination, I knew VA would be in good hands with a true problem solver at the helm, and I'm eager to get to work with you. Last Congress, we secured several important wins for veterans, including passing the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act, the Deborah Sampson Act, the Commander Hannon Act, and the Veterans Compact Act. Earlier this month, we came together again to pass the American Rescue Plan to ensure VA has the funds it needs to continue serving our veterans throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. This includes additional resources for homeless veterans. I understand there was some confusion on this point. I appreciated CNN's effort to work with advocates to set the record straight. I'm so proud of these accomplishments, but there's still much more to do. I also want to thank you, Mr. Secretary, for working with us to craft and pass H.R. 1276, which was signed by the President yesterday. This new law expands VA's authority to vaccinate more veterans, caregivers, and family members. But I know this is a heavy lift. The strength of VA's internal healthcare delivery system and the department's successful role in national vaccination efforts is what makes consideration of new authorities like this possible. To be clear, any expansion must be contingent on VA having adequate supply of the vaccine, and VA must continue to prioritize vaccinations and healthcare delivery for our nation's veterans that are enrolled in VA care above all else. As VA continues to confront the COVID-19 pandemic, our committee will work to create a more welcoming VA and build equity for veterans, reduce veteran suicide, address toxic exposure, ensure student veterans receive quality education, advocate for women veterans, modernize VA, support VA's long-term care facilities, improve VA's management and oversight, and ensure our legislative reforms are implemented effectively. After the immediate crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic subsides, there's one challenge that must be addressed above all else in VA's first 100 days. And that is the veterans' loss of confidence in VA. Over the last 4 years, we saw a VA leadership create turmoil in the agency. Whistleblowers were targeted for retaliation. Survivors of sexual assault, sexual harassment and assault questioned and diminished. And there was hostility towards organized labor, and efforts were taken to obstruct Congress's constitutional oversight responsibilities. And left in the wake of this failed leadership is a trust issue that needs to be resolved with veterans, VA's workforce, and the American people. As we all know, cultural change starts at the top. And it is my hope that with Secretary McDonough's commitment and demonstrated track record of solving problems, VA can begin to build back veterans' trust and make sure all veterans and VA staff feel safe and welcomed walking through its doors. That is why one of my top priorities this year is to create a more welcoming VA for all veterans, regardless of gender, sexuality, gender identity, race, housing status, or citizenship. No veteran should face barriers accessing the care or benefits they've earned. And no VA employee should face discrimination in the workplace. Given emerging information about troubling connections between the veteran community and extremist groups, we need to rebuild bridges to veterans who may feel that they are outside the community. By restoring veterans' faith in VA and rebuilding trust and confidence in the system, we can create and strengthen veterans' connection to community while also building a stronger, more welcoming, and more effective VA. As long as 17 veterans die by suicide each day, our committee will continue our efforts to meaningfully reduce veteran suicide. This Congress will keep fighting for expanded lethal means counseling to all veterans, so Veterans Benefit Administration staff, contractors, community care network providers, and caregivers can provide life-saving information to our veterans. We'll work to make sure community providers have a better understanding of military and veteran culture so they can provide the best treatment possible. And we'll support efforts for increased outreach to our most at-risk veterans, including women, LGBTQ+, and Native veterans. It is long past time we recognize toxic exposure as a cost of war. We finally passed the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act last Congress, but it took more than 4 years. We cannot let that happen again. The burden of proof shouldn't be on our veterans, and there should be no reason why they and their survivors should have to fight VA for the care and benefits they've earned. If America is willing to send our service members into harm's way, then our nation must be willing to ensure that we take care of all those who have borne the battle. I'm committed to advancing comprehensive legislation to address toxic exposure this Congress. I know many of these priorities overlap with Secretary McDonough's priorities for VA, and I look forward to hearing his testimony this afternoon. These first 100 days present a tremendous opportunity to build back veterans' trust in VA. It is my hope that together, by working with Secretary McDonough, President Biden, our Senate colleagues, and the VSO community, we can continue serving all those who've served our country. Thank you, and I yield back my time. And Ranking Member Bost, I now recognize you for 5 minutes for your opening remarks. Ranking Member Bost.
Thank you, Chairman Takano, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. You know, it's a pleasure to see you again. We were able to meet in person a couple weeks ago, but I appreciate you testifying here before the committee and virtually this afternoon. And I hope your appearance today is the first of many. You're taking the helm of the Department of Veterans Affairs at an interesting time. You were the White House Chief of Staff in 2014 when a nationwide access and accountability crisis rocked the VA. VA has come a long way since then. The hard work of this committee, the Senate committee, and the Trump administration led to enactment of landmark legislation. The legislation has begun to transform virtually every aspect of VA. More importantly, it has improved the lives of veterans and their families. Veterans had greater access to care, compensation, education than ever before. VA has gone from one of the worst to one of the best places to work in the federal government. The title of today's hearing, Restoring Faith by Building Trust. But the fact is that the veterans' trust in the VA reached its highest level last year, according to the Quality VA surveys of veterans who had recently interacted with the department. Those are tremendous successes. They should not be forgotten or set aside. That is not to say that we, working with the VA, that we are not in a position where we have to face some challenges and do some changing. We grieve the more than 10,000 veterans and approximately 135 VA employees who've lost their lives during COVID-19. And we stand with the millions of other veterans who lost their loved ones, their jobs, their health, their homes, and their support systems to it. I stand ready to work with you, Mr. Secretary, to make sure you have all the tools you need to help those veterans recover. COVID-19 was an unprecedented challenge for VA. Congress provided VA with an unprecedented amount of resources to face it. That was in addition to an already historic baseline. Approximately $10 billion of the funding Congress gave VA a year ago in the CARES Act still has not been spent. Despite that, Congress gave VA an additional $17 billion in American Rescue Plan 2 weeks ago. Every single one of those dollars comes from the pocket of hardworking Americans. Every single one of those dollars should be spent as they were intended for COVID relief, or they should be returned to the American people. I'm going to hold you accountable for that, Mr. Secretary, and I anticipate that we will not always see eye to eye on that or other important issues, but let me just say this. I have no doubt that we fully agree on one important thing: our respect and commitment to veterans and their families. We have many priorities in common. We both want veterans to get the care and benefit they have earned. We both want to support veterans suffering from toxic exposure. We both want to strengthen service for women veterans. We both want to stop veteran suicide. We both recognize that veterans are a force of good. Veterans come from every age, race, gender, background, creed, and community. They reflect the bravery and beauty of our country. And when they succeed, we all succeed. I look forward to working with you to honor their service and to support them in their civilian lives. Thank you again for being here. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. I now will introduce our witness today, this afternoon. It is a pleasure to welcome the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs, Mr. Dennis McDonough, to testify before our committee for the very first time. Today is Secretary McDonough's 45th day on the job, and he could not have stepped into this role at a more critical time. He has worked tirelessly in public service during his career, and his reputation as someone who is pragmatic and ready to engage and collaborate on tough issues is exactly what we need at VA. I look forward to hearing you lay out your vision on how you will move VA forward in its mission to serve veterans. Secretary McDonough, you are now recognized for 10 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Distinguished members of this committee, thank you for this opportunity to discuss my priorities for VA, and thank you for the very warm welcome. We're able to appear here in freedom and security because of the sacrifices of generations of veterans. It's an honor to serve as Secretary of VA. Let me acknowledge our veteran service organizations participating today and their colleagues not here. Their insights and support make VA better. Let me first thank the committee for its work on increasing authority on vaccination. As the chairman said yesterday, President Biden signed the Save Lives Act. As vaccine supply increases, we will be able to use that authority to vaccinate all veterans, veterans' spouses, and caregivers. Thanks also for passing the American Rescue Plan, significant resources that will help us continue to provide veterans the best care and services during the pandemic. My first 45 days at VA have been inspirational. We celebrated African American vets during Black History Month, and this month, the enormous contributions of women veterans. Two groups of veterans who fought for equal rights and freedom even when they did not fully share in them. The many leaders and employees I've met at VA are highly skilled, dedicated, exceptional professionals, many veterans themselves. President Biden had the same impression during his visit to our DC VA Medical Center earlier this month. The pandemic has challenged VA, our employees, their families, and all Americans. Yet, our employees have shown unwavering strength during historic demands, caring for both veterans and their own families. I'm proud of them. They live VA's I Care values: integrity, commitment, advocacy, respect, and excellence. The pandemic's impact on veterans has been significant. Protecting them and responding to their needs during this pandemic is currently our main effort. We've administered over 3.3 million doses of vaccine to veterans, veteran caregivers, VA employees, and colleagues from other federal agencies. We're determined to vaccinate as many veterans as possible and to expand the pool of veterans we're able to vaccinate. Because of COVID, many veterans, like other Americans, have delayed healthcare, including mental health care. When they return, their conditions may be more complicated because of those delays. And we know from previous economic downturns that veterans who lose their jobs and healthcare benefits often turn to VA for assistance. So as the pandemic ebbs, we expect and we are planning for a surge in requests for care and services. The ARP investments will be important for that effort. To reduce the impact and keep veterans connected to their healthcare teams during the pandemic, we have provided tens of thousands of internet and cellular connected devices to veterans, especially those in remote locations. Many veterans have chosen telehealth services like video to home telehealth visits that have increased by over 1,700% between February of 2020 and January of this year. The pandemic has also had an impact on the processing of compensation and pension claims. The claims backlog has increased from 76,000 cases in March 2020 to over 200,000 today. So COVID impacts are broad, from healthcare delivery to benefit determinations. But with the American Rescue Plan, help is here, help that will significantly ease many pandemic-related challenges. Those resources will allow us to reimburse co-payments veterans have made since April 2020 and alleviate that burden through September of this year. Co-payments should not be an obstacle to care during the pandemic. And these resources will help us build new facilities and improve operations of living conditions at state veterans' homes, decrease the compensation and pension claims backlog by over 112,000 by the end of 2022, and train veterans unemployed due to the pandemic in high demand occupations and high tech education programs. In short, the vital support the American Rescue Plan provides will help alleviate some of the pandemic's most devastating effects. And it goes a long way in caring for veterans and their families, what President Biden sees as our country's most sacred obligation. When it comes to fulfilling that obligation, the president charged me to be a fierce advocate for veterans. To that end, we are focused on 4 fundamental principles as a vision for the future: advocacy, access, outcomes, and excellence. First, VA is going to be the nation's premier advocate for veterans, their families, caregivers, and survivors. Veterans have made a down payment, sometimes in blood and invisible wounds that may affect them the rest of their lives. Their sacrifices have earned them the care and services we provide. We exist to best serve them, not to do what's easy for VA. Second, we'll provide timely access to VA resources, world-class healthcare, earned benefits, and a final resting place that's a lasting tribute to their selfless service. Veterans deserve access to educational opportunities, training, and jobs worthy of their skills and service so that they can continue to strengthen our communities and our country with their leadership. They contribute in every field and endeavor. They've been doing so since we became a country. We must work together to make sure they have the access and opportunities to continue that tradition. And we'll seek new ways to ensure our most vulnerable veterans, especially those who need our outreach, have easier access to care and services that reduce veterans' homelessness and, importantly, suicide. When our most vulnerable veterans want to receive care in their homes from those who love them and are best suited to care for them, we'll help provide access to that care, as well as opportunities for the training, support, and resources our compassionate caregivers need. Third, veteran outcomes will drive everything we do. VA has a proud history of leadership with data and health informatics. We have some of the nation's top data science talent. We are launching a VA data strategy to manage and integrate our data holdings responsibly and ethically to empower veterans in their journey from service to lifelong care and services at VA. Good data, science, and evidence-based policymaking are fundamental to effective and efficient expansion of our COVID vaccination campaign, providing quality health care, tracking and managing benefits, and measuring veterans' experience and their satisfaction in their interactions with us. We'll rely more heavily on data in the future than we ever have before. Fourth, we're going to seek excellence in all we do for veterans by leveraging the strength and diversity that defines our veteran population, our VA workforce, and our country. We will work to ensure every veteran is afforded access to VA's capacity and resources. Diversity, equity, inclusiveness are fundamental to everything we do. We'll welcome all veterans, including women, veterans of color, and LGBTQ veterans. Every person entering a VA facility must feel safe, free of harassment and discrimination. We will never accept discrimination, harassment, or assault. Diversity is a strength, never a weakness among veterans, VA employees, and indeed all of America. So advocacy, access, outcomes, excellence. I recently received a letter from a veteran's son, Sean Kelly. Sean's dad, veteran Dennis Kelly, recently passed at our hospital in Madison, Wisconsin. He wrote, "While saying goodbye to my dad has been difficult, one thing that gives me comfort is the extraordinary care he received while at the VA. The hospice staff always displayed patience and grace, allowing my dad to maintain his dignity until the end. The smallest tasks were always done with gentle demeanor, and most importantly, every interaction I observed was uniquely human. A shot to keep him more comfortable was accompanied by a moment of holding his hand. Moving his position was done gently and with calming, reassuring voices. Every single staff member I interacted with was always professional, unfailingly caring, and a genuinely good person. That's the kind of dignified, excellent care every veteran and every family member deserves to experience every time. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Bost, I look forward to working with you in this committee. You have a critical role to play, and I respect it. Congressional oversight and information sharing allow us all to make better decisions, in fact, the best decisions in serving our vets. I've made this same commitment to transparency and openness to our independent inspector general and to the other government oversight agencies in our department. And last, I would like to simply remember the veterans and the VA employees who have lost their lives to COVID. We mourn each loss and offer our deepest condolences to their families. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today and for your continued support of veterans. I look very much forward to your questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony, your opening statement, Secretary McDonough. I'll recognize myself for the first 5 minutes of questioning. Mr. Secretary, we know from independent research that veterans get mental health care in the VA that is superior to the care they can get in the community on average. VA mental health care providers understand veterans' unique histories and needs and are required to remain up to date on the most effective treatments for a range of mental health challenges veterans may face, including PTSD, suicidal thoughts and behaviors, and military sexual assault. We want veterans to continue to get care in the community when appropriate, but veterans deserve community providers who are trained at the level of VA providers. I want to ask you if you'll commit to making the in-house training VA offers on military and veteran cultural competence and evidence-based treatments mandatory for community care mental health care providers.
Chairman, thanks very much for the question. The bottom line here is it's fundamental that we not only share the best practices that we have, but we also, first and foremost, maintain that capacity in the VA. So we have an aggressive effort to maintain our capacity in-house, to increase by using some of the tools and authorities you've given us to increase and grow that capacity. Third, you've given us, through some of the acts that you just talked about in your opening statement, including the Hannon Act from last year, additional tools and authorities to allow us to engage local community providers to learn from our best practices and make sure that we're in contact with veterans through their local communities. And so we intend to use those authorities and resources as well. And on your question of whether I will commit to mandate that training, let me take that one and study it. There's no doubt that we need to use the authorities that you've already given us to share those best practices, and through the Hannon Act, as we implement the grant making provisions in Section 201 in particular, share those capacities. As to mandating it, let me take that and I'll work with you and your staff and the committee to make sure that we're using that in the most effective way.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for that response. In recent years, there's been considerable attention placed on securing presumptions for those veterans who have been subject to toxic exposures, including burn pits. Aside from offering disability compensation, presumptions also grant access to VA healthcare. We know just over 4 million veterans have served since 9/11 alone. Mr. Secretary, given Congress's attention on this topic, has VA done any assessments to determine the impact of potentially enrolling hundreds of thousands of veterans into the healthcare system in a relatively short period of time?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are obviously constantly reviewing questions around exposure, but also preparing ourselves for expanded care. This is why, for example, the expanded resources that we anticipate needing with a increased demand for care post-pandemic is so important in the ARP. But as it relates to exposure generally, what we have been putting in place is a posture where we are not passively waiting for information to come from us from the NASM or anybody else, but that we are going to be actively looking for additional information from new partners who might have useful science to help us understand the impact of exposure, making sure that we are constantly considering that new data. So I've put in place just earlier this week a process by which each quarter we'll be spending time in a meeting that I chair on making sure that we're looking at the most recent science on exposure and what that means for our veterans. And the last thing about presumptions is we also know is the lack of a presumption serves as a disincentive to vets applying for benefits or care in the first instance. That suggests a lack of trust in the process that they can get a fair hearing on their claim. So we have to, through a much more active posture in developing an understanding of what our vets are going through, surveilling, for example, the experience of all the vets, and including, by the way, continuing active duty members who are at K2, what they are experiencing, and using all that data to inform credible consideration of claims so that vets have trust and confidence in the system, even as we build the science to make the case on presumptions.
Mr. Secretary, my time is up, but I really wanted to get to this issue of making sure that VA does a review. We are in the process of considering important legislation which may have a substantial impact on the VHA. So I need to know whether you can commit to implementing a review to determine what resources VA will need to potentially absorb a significant increase of veterans into its system.
Happily.
Great,
Happily.
thank you. Great, thank you. I now call on Chairman Ranking Member Bost for his 5 minutes. Go ahead, Ranking Member Bost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, and I know it's only been signed in a little over 24 hours, but the SAVE Act, now that it's been signed into law, how soon do we think that VA will start offering vaccine to all veterans, caregivers, and spouses?
Thanks very much, Mr. Bost. So we have to do a couple of things immediately to make sure that we're ready. Let me just give you one example. Right now, we have a statutory requirement to report to the CDC anybody who gets vaccination from us. That's really straightforward when we have a vet who's enrolled with us, because she's enrolled with us, she gets the vaccination, and it automatically goes to CDC. We have to build that capacity for our non-enrolled vets, for spouses, and for caregivers. And so that will take a little bit of time. Then the other and the longest pole in this tent, Mr. Bost, is supply. And we're consuming the supply as soon as we get it. And so we're very focused on May 1 being the period when everybody can access the system. But to be honest with you, right out of the gate here, where there is going to be flexibility in our system. In fact, we're learning just through briefings throughout the day that some vets are able to get appointments as soon as today. But again, we're going to have to be very precise and disciplined in our communication with our vets in our communities. And then we're going to have to be exceedingly aggressive in our execution. But the date I put out there for you is May 1.
How many more individuals have you even been able to check on that number to think how many more individuals we're going to be able to offer the vaccine to and what those numbers look like?
Yeah, so we've been basically targeting our efforts to date at this roughly 6.4 million vets who rely on us for all of their care. You can, as you step up the additional categories that you all have now enacted, you get up to around 24 million. And so it's kind of a 4X growth. And that's why we're being very disciplined in executing to make sure that, and very precise in communicating to our vets so that they know and can know what to expect from us and can plan accordingly. The bottom line, though, is what I'd urge individual vets to do, Mr. Boss, is to be in touch with their local VA Med Center.
Right.
And all the same platforms that we're using to schedule now, which are functioning quite well, will be the same platforms that we'll use to schedule the others.
Yeah. How are you getting the word out to those individuals that are now available to receive this?
We're going to use every channel we have. We're going to use mail, U.S. mail. We're going to use standard email. We're going to use our social media platforms. We're going to partner with our VSOs. We're going to work with, I hope, you all as you're talking to your constituents. And then we're going to make sure that we're using some of these new tools. I will say that this new tool that our technologists here in the building have come up with called Vet Text has worked exceedingly well. By the way, very well with vets of every generation. There's some sense that somehow maybe older vets are not tech savvy in this way. That's not what we're experiencing with Vet Text. It's been a very effective tool.
That's good. I know that you brought up the vaccine. Do you think you'll be able to keep up with the amount of vaccine that's necessary to be able to do this?
Well, right now we surely are. We're moving what we get into arms within, Doc Stone tells me, 3 to 5 days. But you know, we to meet the kind of numbers we're talking about, we're going to have to see kind of 2x the capacity that we're moving, and so we're making sure we're ready for that.
Well, please let us know as Congress how we can help and make sure that we're involved if we need to be. One other thing I need to ask before my time expires. First off, I want to say thank you. I think it was the right call that you're reviewing the EHRM and pause further rollout and changing before charging forward into Columbus. You and I had talked about that.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about kind of where we're at? I mean, the original pause, we thought maybe 6 months, but you said 3. That's a good number there. What are you looking to find out in that time frame?
Well, thanks so much. And I should have said this before. As you said, I really enjoyed our opportunity to talk, and I look forward to engaging all the members of the committee. I have a rule here, which is no surprises to you all. And as you said, we may not always agree, but you'll never wonder why or what, Right. As it relates to EHRM, I'll tell you what struck me is what, and you all know this, but we're seeing productivity declines bigger than I would have anticipated, but importantly also continuing longer than I would have anticipated. So that's one of the things that we said, hey, let's make sure we're lift this up and take a hard look at it. In terms of what to expect, we put out the bogey out there of saying, roughly 3 months for us to get a good, clean picture on this. What I wanted to make sure is that we have success learning from our clinicians and practitioners on the ground in Spokane, such that they become advocates as we go to Columbus, and from Columbus back to Walla Walla, to make sure that we're building the coalition of practitioners, MSAs, nurses, docs, that they end up being the advocates for the expansion of and the continued expansion of the effort. And so I don't have any additional news to report to you all. I know that you all sent a really helpful, robust letter down where you're asking for us to lay some of this out in writing, which we're in the process of doing now. And we'll get that to you forthwith, and then we'll keep an open line with you as we run this review.
Well, I thank you for doing that, and I thank you for being here today. And my time has well expired. And Mr. Chairman, I apologize for going over, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. I appreciate your attentiveness to the time. I now call on not ranking member, but Chairwoman Brownlee of our Health Subcommittee. Chairwoman Brownlee, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. It's great to be with you this morning. I have great confidence in your leadership and look forward to the work we do in the 117th Congress. I'm going to try to get 4 questions in, so we'll see if it works. The first question, which I asked Dr. Matthews during a subcommittee meeting I had last week, is I want your assurance that you will fully implement the Deborah Sampson Act that was passed last year.
You have it. You have my assurance.
Terrific, terrific. And I know from our conversation that you're working really hard and doing a lot around sexual harassment and assault within the VA. Can you just tell me, how do you plan on every VA facility across this great nation, how you're going to hold each facility accountable so that we truly get to a zero tolerance of this and rid it out of the system?
It starts by, my communication from the secretary's slot. And I've started that from day one. And I've continued that on a regular basis in my public communications, as just now with my opening statement, and internally, making sure that in each of my interactions with the workforce, that I'm communicating this clearly. Third is making sure that our internal governance agencies and organizations understand that this is a priority and that they help enforce it. And importantly, that people who feel threatened or harassed understand that there's a place for them to go to be heard, and to be heard in a way that's respectful, does not re-traumatize survivors, but allows us to make sure that they feel that there's a place to go to. And then lastly, that we follow through on accountability measures. And that's across the board on sexual harassment, on sexual abuse, but then across the board on accountability measures. And so those are the ways. And by the way, then I'm going to have to get on the road, which I'm about to start doing here relatively soon, and making sure that I'm getting out there and underscoring that not only do we have to create this climate of hospitable climate, but also that we recognize a very simple fact: our diversity is our fundamental strength. That's why the veterans look like our military force, and why the military force looks like the country, because we're the strongest country on earth because of how diverse we are. And we have to continue to recognize that, invest in it, and protect it.
Well, thank you for that. And that's a perfect lead into my next question, because in your opening comments, you talked about data, science-driven decisions. And I have reintroduced my bill, the Every Veteran Counts Act, which will direct the VA to conduct a national survey of veterans. And this would be for the first time in more than 10 years, in order to ensure that we have an accurate understanding of the veteran population and the emerging needs. We cannot meet the enormous challenge of a diverse patient population without that data. And right now, 2020, 22% of the total veteran population, it represents diversity, and that's going to grow to 35% by 2040. So this is critical. Senator Hirona has agreed to work with me on this and lead the bill in the Senate, but we have to get this data accurate, and this is an area where we don't. And not only does the VA depend on this data, but other agencies do as well. So I hope we can work on that together, and would like to see. Great, excellent. Last question is, I'm sure you are aware of the enormous backlog within the National Personnel Records Center. And, I think they're trying their best to catch up on this, but based on the response that I have received, it doesn't seem to be an acceptable answer to me. And I understand it's a very, very, very big challenge, but this backlog within the NPRC is going to hurt our veterans. It's going to hurt future veterans trying to get benefits. It's going to hurt folks that are in the pipeline right now. So I'm just curious to know how you are going to wrestle with this within the VA community, veteran community.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for this. And you've raised this with me. Mr. Lamb raised this with me. Mr. Bost, Mr. Takano raised this with me. One of the first things I did was, it just struck me that it's crazy that we haven't gotten the NPRC and the NARA folks who work in conjunction with NPRC out in St. Louis, and then NARA, the archives folks here at College Park. We haven't gotten them vaccinated. So on using my authority, I said, let's get these guys vaccinated and get them back to work. I'm struck that, so one, that's first thing, which is let's get them back to work. first and foremost. Second is let's get those records digitized so that we're not stuck in this place again. So I talked to the archivist just the day before yesterday on this. And so you all have given us some money both in the omnibus last year, and then we will have access to some money in the American Rescue Plan to allow us to get this stuff digitized so then we can move it more quickly. And so those are the steps that we have to take, which is let's get people back to work. We have the vaccine to do that now. We have signed all that paperwork, and hopefully we're going to we'll be getting some shots in arms here. If not having done that already, then within the next couple of days.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Brownlee. Talofa, Ms. Radewagen, your 5 minutes. I call on you next.
Thank you, Chairman Takano and Ranking Member Boss, for holding this hearing today. Thank you, Secretary McDonough, for your testimony, and welcome. You know, I met you at the White House in February 2015, so it's good to see you again. Congratulations on your new post, and I look forward to working with you on behalf of our country's veterans. Before I get into my questioning, I also want to recognize an important Veterans Administration responsibility in the Pacific Island nations of Palau, Federated States of Micronesia, or FSM, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, or RMI. These freely associated states, or FAS, are affiliated with the United States, a compact of free association, or COFA, and are among the closest mutual security alliances between the United States and any nation. COFA enables qualified FAS citizens to enter in the U.S. military service. FAS volunteer enlistments often have been higher per capita than in any other state of the Union. FAS citizens served with honor, suffered casualties, and were killed in action alongside U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq. And of course, some of these FAS veterans returned from service disabled, still injured. These allies have earned and are morally entitled to VA services that are not easily provided to veterans residing outside the U.S. in the FAS. This is despite some of the remarkable and resourceful efforts of VA employees to extend the reach of the VA in the FAS by every possible means. We need to consider expansion of digital technology and intensification of internet-based support for healthcare services. And I'm happy to see, Mr. Secretary, that you touch on the use of technology in response to COVID-19. Hopefully, VA will also continue to leverage new technologies post-pandemic to address the needs of remote veterans, both in the FAS and in the territories. Mr. Secretary, can you confirm here and now VA's commitment to our veterans from the freely associated states?
I can, yes.
Thank you, sir. And now to my question. Mr. Secretary, what plans do you have to address the needs of veterans in remote areas such as American Samoa and the other territories? Other than telehealth and other technologies, are there other resources VA can tap to serve remote communities? Dr. Adam Robinson, the director of the VA Pacific Islands healthcare system, suggested in a recent interview that he'd like to work with DoD and possibly share certain resources. Do you intend to explore options like interagency cooperation?
Thank you very much for the question, Talofa. I'm happy to see you again. The short answer is yes. Well, I'd be happy to explore the kinds of interagency cooperation you're talking about. One, two, I think there's already, as we watch efforts nascent as they are to increase access to vaccination in American Samoa, the cooperation between VA personnel and local health officials is vitally important to our efforts also to expand care. And both of those steps on top of access and use of telehealth platforms, which have just exploded as we're all familiar now, during the course of the pandemic. I think there's really important lessons to draw from this experience, and then really important lessons that may allow us to expand this even more aggressively. So the short answer to all that is, yes, and all of the above.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Chairman, yield back.
Thank you, Representative Rattlewagon. I recognize Representative Connor Lamb for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for joining us. Welcome. On the topic of the archives and military records, I just want to commend you, and in particular, Chris Diaz and Aaron Scheinberg in your department for the attention that they showed to this and communication that they maintained with me. It really was exemplary. So that reflects well on your early tenure, and thank you. On another topic, I want to address the issue of the collective bargaining rights and union rights of VA employees. They were blatantly disregarded and dishonored under the previous administration. I come at this with a strong belief that the best way we will serve the mission of the VA, taking care of the veterans, is by taking care of the people whose job it is to actually take care of them. And I think the anecdote you gave from Mr. Kelly in your opening was very powerful, in that the thing that that veteran's son was left with was really about the employees of the VA and how they treated his father. And the way we make sure that happens, I think, is make sure that the VA employees themselves are treated respectfully and humanely, and with the professionalism that they deserve. So I was happy about President Biden's executive order. And just for those who didn't see it, I want to be really clear that he has ordered, it is the policy of the United States to encourage union organizing and collective bargaining in the federal government, and that the federal government should serve as a model employer. That order was issued on January 22nd of this year. I know it hasn't been a long time, but 2 months later, we still have in my state of Pennsylvania a VBA in the city of Philadelphia, where the union officials have been offered a conference room where before the Trump administration, they had multiple offices to do their work. We still have union organizing officials whose job it is to represent workers, doing their representation on their own time at a cost to themselves, not even for free, at a cost to themselves, because their representation time has not been restored yet by the local VA. And so the impression we're left with is that the VA on the ground is dragging their feet in implementing President Biden's order. And if this was some sort of new right or new set of working conditions, you might be able to understand why 2 months would be needed. But I think the frustration that I get from VA employees is this has been our right for a long time. We bargained office space a long time ago. We bargained official time a long time ago. We just want it restored to what it was before Trump. And so why is that taking so long? And so if you could just explain to us a little bit today what is being done to implement the executive order, why it's taking so long, and give us your commitment that you will try to speed these up and just show the employees the respect and urgency that they deserve.
Yeah. So on your last point, you've got that. I will dig in on that. I mean, there'll be announcements that we're taking steps as it relates to certain pieces of this in the next days and weeks. On the question of office space, I will take and follow up on that. If you have other specific places that you want to highlight to our attention, please do so. And we sent out that communication in early February, so I'll follow up on that. And then just to your broader point, I have the same view you do, which is that I believe that a unionized workforce is a strong workforce. I think that collective bargaining is a powerful tool for a strong workforce. And I think the evidence of this is manifold, but in the VA, the evidence of it is the performance over the course of the pandemic. And in the stories like Sean Kelly sent in. I was struck that's why I included the section of his letter that I did in my remarks, because it said as much about the way our workers treat our veterans with the dignity and respect that they do is a very powerful thing. And at the end of the day, I've made a commitment in taking this job that I will make every decision based on whether that decision increases access and improves outcomes for veterans. And so I see questions around labor management relations in that same framework. We'll be making sure that we both make those decisions and then implement them consistent with empowering a workforce that is our number one asset as we confront these challenges.
I thank you for that. And I just emphasize that you're dealing with a workforce that has done some heroic and incredible work, particularly in the last year, but they feel very mistreated and they feel very unfairly treated. And that's why I think time is of the essence. So thank you. Look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Lamb. I now call upon General Bergman. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary McDonough. Pleasure to meet you, even if it's only here on the video screen. Look forward to face-to-face sooner rather than later. And since time is of the essence, let me get right to my questions. I'm very concerned about the impact the pandemic is having on veteran mental health and suicide. But because of reporting lags, VA's annual suicide data reports contain information on suicide deaths from 2 years ago. That means we won't have 2020 suicide statistics until 2022. That's way too long, especially if urgent action is needed, and it's needed now. So how could we make that information more timely? What metrics are you tracking in real time to determine the mental health effects of the pandemic, and what are those metrics telling you? So how soon and how accurate?
So the reporting lag on overall numbers is maddening. I agree with you, and this is part of our overall data strategy is to figure out how we go and find and marshal the data that we do have, and then get it consumable in a way that informs policy now, and importantly, in a way that helps veterans inform the decisions that they make about their incremental training dollar, or about how they choose to engage VHA and mental health service. One is we just have to make the data more user-friendly. Two is we have a lot of data that comes out of the national strategy from 2018, where frankly, so we do two things in the REACH VET program that I think are very important. One is we draw and constantly update data as against about 61 measurements for our veterans that together paint a picture of what to worry about in terms of at risk for suicide. So one is we try to get a picture of as granular as we can of who's at risk. And then two is we try aggressively to stay in touch with those personnel and then to get them into services. And so that's the second thing we do. Yeah, please.
If I might, Mr. Secretary, you hit the nail on the head. And before we talked about the personnel records and all these things, this is all data driven and digital. And I know you're working, and I'd like to just kind of roll right that into my next question. Because last Congress, I spearheaded the IMPROVE Act, which was signed into law as part of the Hannon Act. The IMPROVE Act would increase support for community organizations serving at-risk veterans. And that's the key to preventing veteran suicide, especially among the 14 of the 20 a day who are outside the VA system. And, they're not touched by the VA. Are you able to, at this point, or give me a commitment that, number one, you'll fast track the implementation of the IMPROVE Act, and how do we explore unexplored areas to reaching out and contacting those veterans who are not within the VA system, get them the help, and then get them in?
The Section 201, which I think is part of your IMPROVE Act, gives us new authority to make grants in communities. And so we are spending a lot of time on this because we've not done this kind of grant making yet. And so, we're also talking very closely with with Senator Bozeman about this, and Senator Tester, who I think worked with you and others on these provisions. And so we are aggressively trying to get that grant making into the field. There's some steps, frankly, though, that we have to take now to make sure that we do that well, so that we're not kind of tripping over ourselves. But I do think that's among the most important new authorities that you've given us, which is our ability to get into the communities that know these vets and have a way to reach them in their community, so they don't have to, if there's some reason, be that stigma or some other reason, or a lack of knowledge about what's available at the VA. If the community knows that somebody's at risk, if somebody's feeling down, if there's stigma associated with them getting treatment, that the community is helping address that. So there's no question that that's a big piece of the puzzle, I believe. But at the end of the day,
Yep.
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm a Marine. I'm a Marine. I like to stay on time. And I just want, you offered about hitting the road. So in a perfect world, I would like to hit the road with you next fall. And we're going to go to the Iron Mountain VA hospital, because all VA hospitals are not alike. It's a smaller hospital. We do it on a Thursday. We work some C-box through the Western Upper Peninsula, Michigan, and get down, if we can schedule it right. Burnsville will play Stillwater in football on Friday night, and on Saturday, St. John's will play Gustavus.
Yeah, and I know
How
how
about
those
that,
games
Ian?
go, both of them.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back.
I love it. There'll be a Johnny's win and a Ponies win, and I'll love them both.
Well, we'll
thank
put a
you.
beer on that.
Or a couple.
Well, thank you, General Bergman, for being such a stickler for time and mentioning beer. I'll now call on the vice chairman of the full committee, also chairman of our Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, Representative Levin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I have to follow that by offering a warm welcome to the La Jolla VA and to our beautiful Southern California coastal communities. We can't wait to have you. It's very exciting to get to work with you, and I appreciated your call recently. A few questions for you. As you know, we passed some major bills at the end of the last Congress, beginning of this Congress. The Isaacson and Rowe Veterans Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act provides much needed relief for our veterans during the pandemic to strengthen their benefits in the years to come as well. I'm eager to work with you to implement this legislation, particularly provisions that improve the oversight of educational institutions and establish new transition and homelessness resources. I'm also thrilled that we were able to establish a rapid retraining program for unemployed veterans as part of the American Rescue Plan earlier this month. And as the chair of the subcommittee with jurisdiction, I look forward to holding oversight hearings and following up on implementation of these measures later this year. In the meantime, it would be really helpful if we could have regular progress updates from you and from your team. And I'd like to ask, can you commit to sharing such updates on implementation of the benefits package and the American Rescue Plan on at least a monthly basis to the committee?
Yeah, so I'm happy to commit to the regular updates, Chairman. I guess what I want to maintain a little flexibility on is it a monthly or a bi-monthly thing? So let me take that. But I promise you the regular updates, and let me work through whether that's the timeline of that. I feel on the hook for the reason you just said on the VRAP, and for the reason Mr. Bost said, which is you all have given us a lot of resources. These are taxpayers' resources. We're on the hook to be very transparent and clear with you about our spend plan. And then ultimately for us to not just be measuring what we're putting in here, but measuring what vets are getting out. That's the name of the game here. So I commit to the regular updates. I'm going to be careful to not say monthly yet. I may come back to you, say by the end of the week, or early next, and say monthly is okay. But before I put this on my team, let me make sure that we can do it, because I don't want to make a commitment that I can't live up to.
Thank you, sir. And a related question, another one of our priorities is upgrading the VA's archaic IT systems, and particularly for the delivery of education benefits. I had a chance to visit Muskogee and see the call center using some very antiquated technology. VA recently signed a contract with Accenture to do a lot of this work, but hasn't provided us with that many details on the contract and the larger project, including a 10-year cost estimate. I appreciate that VA is arranging a briefing to share more details with our staff and look forward to receiving a readout. Ongoing updates on this issue would be really helpful to us, especially given the track record when it comes to VA implementing technology modernization projects. So same question, can you commit to sharing these updates with us on a regular basis?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And what I'll say is the single most impressive briefing I've had since I got here was by the head of our education programming by the name of Charmaine Bogue. She is an unbelievable talent. And I'm happy to commit to the regular updates there too.
Thank you, sir. Last question for you. I was concerned, I know a number of my colleagues were, to hear that VA recently announced it'll cease the practice known as rounding out, which allows students in their final term to round out their schedule with non-required courses to achieve full-time status. Well, this decision was made under your predecessor. If it's not reversed, there are going to be dire consequences. The change could cut monthly housing allowances and educational benefits for thousands of student veterans, impacting their ability to meet their living expenses. And as a result, many students may have to take out additional loans or drop out of school altogether. So the question for you is, can you commit to reassessing this decision of rounding out, ending the practice of rounding out, and taking necessary action to protect student veterans from financial harm?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is this is the first I'm hearing of it, but I'm happy to take a look, and if it's available option to take a look at it, I will. But I just want you to know that this is the first I'm hearing of it, and so I may be coming back to you and saying that I don't have access to it, but if I do, I will.
Thank you, sir. Well, from what I've been told, it could be a very big deal for our student veterans later this year if the policy isn't changed. But I thank you so much. I really look forward to working with you. And I'm out of time, and like the general, I want to be respectful, so I'll yield back. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I think, thank you, Mr. Levin. So far, I think the vice chairman of the committee has been the first one and the only one to stay on time. So I hold him up as a role model to the rest of the committee. Mr. Banks of Indiana, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll take that as a charge. And Mr. Secretary, thank you for being with us today. I agree with Ranking Member Boss that a strategic review of EHRM is the responsible course of action. If I may, I would like to offer 3 recommendations for you to strengthen the program based on watching it develop over the last few years.
Please.
First, WHA needs more responsibility for strategy and requirements. The doctors and the nurses in VHA and the veterans they serve are the customers. OEHRM is the implementer. When VHA is not very clear about what it needs, or when OEHRM does not listen, the results have been very poor. Secondly, we have to stop tasking Cerner outside of its core competencies. Cerner is an EHR company. It cannot and should not be expected to integrate all of VA's systems or fulfill every technological need. Third, I think the EHR has not proved its viability until its performance improves in Spokane, and then we complete a go live at a large medical center, including all the Cerner modules. After that, its cost estimate and schedule have to be revamped. Mr. Secretary, I'm wondering, do any of these observations align with the input that you're receiving in your early days and in your initial assessment that you're being briefed on by your team at this point?
Yeah, they do. In candor, they do, except the last sentence you read or that you stated. I've not I've not kind of put that on the table, but everything else you said does. And, as a general matter, I think that we just need more jointness in the execution of the program so that, as you say, the VHA customers have not only a big seat at the table, but also kind of an ability to sit with people at their shoulder to test and to run this thing. And that we're not letting kind of any one piece of a multi-component effort here take and own this without listening to the executors. Because at the end of the day, this is about service provision and outcomes for the vets. And that's got to be what drives it. And the best proxy for that right now is making sure that our practitioners, our clinicians, docs, nurses, MSAs understand what it means and see its benefit. If they don't, then we're going to be in this box for a long time.
I appreciate that. I've been concerned about the EHRM spend rate as well for a long time. And up to this point, the VA's funding requests have been front loaded. Spending is supposed to peak this year at $2.6 billion. But the pace of go lives at medical centers will not peak until years from now. Do you agree that we need to slow down the spend rate?
What I agree to is to take a hard look at that question. I mean, one of the things we're learning is it does appear to be requiring a lot more people on the target in Spokane, at least right now, than I think as I read the planning, than the planning anticipated. And so the reason I'm wondering about the spend rate is if there is more people on and time on the target, I worry about what that means for the spend rate. So maybe you and I are saying the same thing, but I do agree with you that we have to figure out precisely what the use case in Spokane is telling us. And then what does that mean for the larger effort? And my commitment to you is to be very transparent with you on this and to make sure that we're operating off the same data and drawing on the best experience we can here, because like this effort's gone on too long. It's been too costly, and we got to get right.
Let me quickly turn to my last question. I want to talk about Spokane for a moment. The improvement effort there is evolving. First, there were Tiger teams, then there were work groups and an advancement plan. Are we going to see changes to the EHR in Spokane at the end of the strategic review, or is there a different timeline?
So is your question, are we going to see changes to the EHRM, meaning the software itself, or what do you mean?
The timeline for the strategic review,
Yeah.
It seems that it continues to evolve for the actual strategic review.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. So what I've said is that I think we can get the kind of jointness we need where the customers are informing the experience. And we're obviously keeping an eye on spend rate. I mean, this is the real strength of OHRM is making sure that we understand that additional requirements mean additional cost. And so we have to balance that, those two competing priorities to get the best of both, and to use the lessons of Spokane to make decisions about the further go lives. I don't think that means we fundamentally change the underlying program in Spokane. I think it means it tells us a little bit about what we need to do as we're going live in the subsequent places. I think we'll be able to draw some conclusions about that in that 12-week partnership, 12-week timeline. But at the same point, if we find something that tells us, well, there's something more fundamental going on here, I'll come to you guys with, in complete candor and transparency and say, this is what we found. This is what we need to do.
All right, thank you. My time long ago expired.
Yes, I saw Mr. Banks. But thank you very much. I now call on Chairman Pappas of our Oversight Investigation Subcommittee.
Well, thank you, Chairman Takano, and Mr. Secretary, it's an honor to be with you. Thank you for your service to the veterans of New Hampshire and all across our nation. We appreciate you joining us here today. As the chairman mentioned, I chair the Subcommittee on Oversight Investigations, and over the last couple of years, we've had several hearings on whistleblower protection at VA. We know we have heard from the IG over time that there is a culture of retaliation within VA, that VA has floundered, in their words, to set up the Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection to ultimately protect the individuals who are working in the system who come forward with claims of waste, fraud, abuse, and better ways that we can ultimately serve our veterans in the end. So I'm wondering how much you will make a priority of ensuring that VA is going to protect the whistleblowers in the agency and ensure that they know their rights and know how to come forward with this valuable information.
Yeah, it's a huge priority. I've been talking to the workforce about it since I started. As indicated in my opening remarks, I've had these I've met with the heads of each of the accountability agencies inside and organizations inside the building. You may have seen that earlier today, the president announced his intent to nominate a leader for the OAWP, for example, who has great experience in standing up effective organizations, including a new independent IG in the context of the Philadelphia School District, and somebody with a proven track record on accountability matters. And then at the end of the day, I've said two things about the agency here, which is one is the lifeblood of a well-functioning agency is the free flow of good information. And by good, I don't mean only information that tells a positive story. I mean information that tells us what's going on. So the free flow of that information is a prerequisite for us to be great. The second is any impediments of the free flow of that information, including retaliation against whistleblowers, including ignoring requests from the Inspector General, those things will not be tolerated here ever. And so I don't know that there's a culture that Mike Missel mentioned to you of retaliation, but if there is, we're going to change it, and that will take some doing, because the free flow of information that tells the accurate story, good or bad, is what we need to succeed. And we owe that to the vets. We owe that to you.
Well, I appreciate that commitment. And recently, Chairman Takano and I sent a letter to you that outlined several egregious cases of whistleblowers. We haven't received a response yet. I'm just hoping we can get your commitment to engage on that issue and get a response back.
You've got it. You've got it.
Okay.
I've seen the letter. We'll make sure we'll get you a response in a timely way here.
Okay, terrific. One of the other issues I want to raise, and I appreciate you bringing up the issue of honoring our veterans in terms of their final resting place. An issue that's been brought to me by my state veterans cemetery in New Hampshire is that we know that there are many that serve in our National Guard who serve alongside active duty counterparts who have been on the front lines of fighting COVID over the last year. But many of these guardsmen and reservists often face difficulty securing parity in terms of VA benefits. One of the bills that I've introduced deals with equity for guards and reserves, which would ensure that state-run veteran cemeteries won't jeopardize their federal funding if they choose to inter certain honorably discharged members of the Guard and Reserve and their spouses. This came up in a hearing last year. I was really dissatisfied with the response from VA at the time, which said that this move would, quote, diminish the distinct honor that those veteran and service members who have earned similar burial rights receive. And so I'm just hoping that you might be able to reevaluate this position, to take a look at this legislation and see if there are ways that we can allow state-run veteran cemeteries to make this decision without losing federal funding.
Yeah, I'm actually familiar with the issue. I had a discussion with our team about it, I think last week or the week before. We're taking an initial step here, which is to go out to all the states to ask if there's other states who have a situation or have made choices similar to the one that New Hampshire has made. And so we're going to get that information, and my commitment to you, Mr. Pappas, is to stay in touch with you on it and to make sure that we, in the first instance, have the information to make any decision. But in all cases, you've got my commitment to take a look at it, to be transparent with you on it. And the first step of that, if we haven't already gone out with that RFI, request for information, we will be going out with it shortly.
Well, appreciate that. Appreciate your service, and I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Chairman Pappas, and you're ahead of the game here. Let's see. We have Mr. Roy. Mr. Roy, you are recognized for 5 minutes. Is Mr. Roy here? Mr. Roy? If Mr. Roy is not available, we'll go to Ms. Luria. Ms. Luria? Chairwoman Luria of our DAMA subcommittee.
Well, thank you, Chairman Takano, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for appearing before the committee today, and I look forward to working with you in coming months. I want to go back to the question that my colleague, Representative Connor Lamb asked, really just for the emphasis that I have seen and heard the same things from my union employees here at the Hampton VA. So at Hampton, at the AFG Local 2328, management is refusing to abide by President Biden's executive orders to restore official time. So I'm just asking, and hopefully you can reiterate from the conversation you have with Mr. Lamb, that you'll work with your VA facilities and VISN offices to make sure that the president's executive orders to restore official time and comply with the intent of that order will be fully implemented at all VA facilities for all VA employees.
I will.
Well, thank you for that commitment. I really appreciate it and really want to take care of those folks who take care of our veterans. So that's very important. As chair of the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs, one of the things that we focused on that's really challenging for some veterans is claims for military sexual trauma. And you'll soon be receiving a letter from myself and my and several colleagues on both sides of the aisle with several policy recommendations that we've compiled collectively from our work over the last few years and learning from veterans who have experienced military sexual trauma and who've experienced several challenges in trying to file claims related to that and receive care at the VA. So I just wanted to speak to you and highlight that letter and also ask for your commitment in helping these veterans deal with these particularly difficult and sensitive situations, and that we can try to do everything we can as far as policy is concerned to actually make it easier for them to receive the care that they deserve.
Yeah, four things, I think. One, you have my commitment. Two, I look forward to seeing the letter. We're really looking hard right now at policies and procedures on this question. And that's because three, this is a major priority for me as a very important signal to address many of the things that Chairwoman Brownlee raised, which is an overall culture of hospitality, hospitableness to all of our veterans. And four, that comes from a series of meetings now that, comes from guidance from the president, who's been very clear on this. It also comes from a series of meetings I've done with Secretary Austin, whom I've worked with now over many years. He and I have now had a couple of meetings, including with survivors. And making sure, one thing that I take from those meetings is the fact that our survivors too often are re-traumatized by the process of filing claims, of seeking care, and we just have to get better on this. And not only that, I think we and DoD together and jointly, I think, as you know, very, very well from your own career, we have to get better jointly at this question of both stopping assault, harassment, abuse from happening in the first instance. If it happens, making the abusers accountable, and then and as important as anything, investing in protecting and helping heal the survivors. And that's a continuum of challenges that there's a lot of that we can do, and we are doing in a joint way with DOD. But if we do it together, it'll be much more impactful. Sorry, I didn't mean to use a lot of your time there.
It's okay. Well, I really am appreciative that you've already put so much thought and focus on this issue, and really will look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle on this committee and on the Armed Services Committee with you to help improve this issue for our veterans. Lastly, in my little time remaining, also an issue that we've discussed in the DAMA subcommittee is the C&P exam inventory backlog. Normally we would have approximately 140,000 exams kind of in the process on a normal basis. With COVID, we've shot up to about 350,000 and a significant backlog. I had a hearing recently, and one of the challenges that I have, from leadership at the VA and VBA is that they haven't provided a written plan or really a timeline that can show when this backlog will be complete. I know they're ambitious to have it done by the end of this fiscal year, but without some more data and clarification, it's hard for us as the committee to understand if you have the adequate resources to remove this backlog and get these veterans seen and their cases evaluated by the end of the fiscal year. So I know my time has expired. I didn't know if you had any feedback quickly on that.
Well, I saw the letter. I saw both your letter that came in, I think, before I got in office. I spent a lot of time with the letter, I think last week. And I don't know if it's come to you, but I have to refresh my memory on just how much data and timeline we gave in there, and we can follow up separately. And if the letter is wanting in some way, I'm happy to take another run at it. And in all cases, I get the meat of your question, which is once you show us the plan and you prove to us you have the resources, and that's a fair question. So let me take that for action. But my only question back to you is, have you seen the letter, and is the letter lacking on the kind of data that you're looking for?
Mr. Secretary, I haven't seen the letter response yet. Just basing my question off of the hearing we had recently. Okay. So I'll look forward to your response and make sure to review that and reach out again if we have any.
Good. There was you and I think as many as 10 or 12 of your colleagues. We had a fairly meaty response, but that doesn't mean that it was meaty enough. So I look forward to hearing from you on once you've seen that. And in all cases, I'll take the request too.
Okay. Thank you so much for your support on these issues, and I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Luria. I now recognize Dr. Murphy, Representative Dr. Murphy, for 5 minutes. Dr. Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and Ranking Member Bost, and I want to thank Mr. Secretary for being here today. Mr. Secretary, I worked at a veterans hospital during surgical training. I've worked and taken care of veterans for 30 years here in Eastern North Carolina, and actually continue to take care of them.
Thanks for that.
I love our veterans. We actually, in my district, have the 6th most veterans of any district in the country. They love coming east, and they come to Camp Lejeune and all these places, and they stay there. So there's a very, very a very large local population. I want to just ask about this. You're in a hard job. Everybody that's preceded you has made promises about accountability, about this and about that. And unfortunately, it just does not seem, and this is 30 years of experience of me working at the VA, it just doesn't seem to me that we've gained any traction. And not particularly any fault of your own, but I'm going to attend to that, doesn't buy it with me. Because I demand, when I ran a surgical practice, I demanded accountability, and that starts at the top. You are in a customer service agency. And our customers are our veterans. These are the brave men and women who have sacrificed, at times the ultimate sacrifice, their life for this nation. And perhaps I'm just being a hard ass as a surgeon, but our VA needs accountability, and that starts with you. And I'm going to get on the phone literally as I hang up here and speak with the Veterans Director at the VA in Fayetteville, who accompanies our area. And we're going to have a hard discussion, because this is an unfortunate discussion, because we just had one 3 weeks ago, and I've seen 0 results. So I'd like a pledge from you, and I appreciate the problem with the record backlog, that you are going to hold everybody accountable. And I mean down from our Onslow County folks where we call and nobody literally will pick up the phone. We cannot do this to our veterans. They do not deserve this type of treatment. So I appreciate your willingness to do this, but I also want to hold your hands to the fire that you hold each of our veterans agencies close to be responsible. I know it's hard to recruit to the VA. I know that very much. I know there are manpower shortages. I know there are, but I don't live in the world of excuses. I live in the world of can do. And I would like to hear that from you. I'll just give you a minute to respond to that.
Can do. I agree.
That's all you got?
Well, I agree with everything you said, and you said you're can do. I'm can do too. So I'm accountable to you. I'm accountable to all the people that work here. Ultimately, I'm accountable to the president and to the vets. I've said I've made every decision based on increased access, better outcomes, and that means holding people to account when that doesn't happen. And I trust. I don't know much about you other than you went to a place where Davidson, where somebody very, very important to me also goes. But I've heard enough from you to understand that you're kind of a no BS person, a can-do person. And I'll tell you, yeah, I agree with you. You can hold me to account for all that. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. And as I said, you're in a hard job. I know that completely. But this job requires leadership. It requires action. It requires accountability. I'm very glad to hear that you're going to be out and about. I look forward to you visiting Eastern North Carolina in our district because we're going to make some hard visits and ask some hard questions to our VAs here. So I thank you for servicing all our veterans, regardless of their skin color or any of the other silos that we want to put people in. They're veterans first, and that's what we owe to them. We owe to them service. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will yield back my time.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. I now recognize Representative Lauren Underwood for 5 minutes. Ms. Underwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to begin by congratulating Secretary McDonough for his overwhelming bipartisan confirmation in the Senate. Welcome, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you.
As a member of this committee and as a registered nurse, it's my mission to advance policies that are going to strengthen the VA's mental health care services and invest in evidence-based suicide prevention initiatives. One significant intervention to save veterans' lives is lethal means safety, which has been proven to reduce the risk of suicide. I'm encouraged that the VA has implemented mandatory lethal means safety trainings for some VA employees, but for others and for all community care providers and family caregivers, that training is optional and voluntary completion rates are strikingly low. And this is especially concerning because of the importance of maintaining parity between the care that veterans receive at VA and in the community. And we know that requiring these trainings is necessary. While the completion rate for mandatory providers is over 80%, only a few hundred, like very few hundred community providers nationwide have voluntarily taken the training. And so I introduced the Lethal Means Safety Training Act to ensure that everyone caring for and regularly interacting with our nation's veterans is required to take these life-saving trainings. Mr. Secretary, will you look into actions that you can take with your existing authorities to further expand mandatory lethal means safety trainings and ensure that anyone caring for a veteran is prepared to have a conversation that could save the life of a veteran in crisis?
Yes, there's an offshoot of a question that the chairman asked too, and I'll absolutely look into this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Evidence-based suicide prevention initiatives like lethal means safety are more important than ever during the COVID-19 pandemic, which has led to significantly higher rates of suicide ideation. And I look forward to working with you on this priority. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has also led to historic job losses. While there have been improvements, the unemployment rate for veterans was 5.2% in February, more than 2 percentage points higher than the rate in 2019. As we look for solutions to ensure that our veterans can find high quality employment opportunities, I'm encouraged by models like the Vet Tech program at Fermi National Laboratory in my district. Fermi Lab offers paid internships to military veterans training as technicians, creating career pathways in industries of the future. This model could also be used to expand employment opportunities for veterans interested in pursuing careers like mental health professionals, which would also address a glaring need at the VA. A 2020 Office of the Inspector General report found severe occupational staffing shortages for mental health professionals across VA facilities, including psychiatrists, psychologists, and nurse practitioners specializing in mental health and substance use disorders. Mr. Secretary, can you describe the VA's strategies to address immediate and long-term mental health workforce shortages, including additional funding or hiring authorities that the VA would need from Congress to carry out those plans?
Yeah, so we don't need additional funding or authorities at the moment, but I'm happy to hear that you're willing to hear it if we assess that we need either of those. The first thing is to retain the talent we have. We have some excellent talent. The second thing, as I said earlier, is to make sure that we are recruiting new talent to that pool. Many of the things that we've talked about already in this conversation, including making sure that we're treating the workforce, including the unionized workforce, with the respect it deserves, making sure that we're having the kind of work atmosphere that's important, that's critical to maintaining and attracting this kind of talent is the next part of that. Third is making sure that we're using relationships in the communities to share best practices and deepen networks and connections among VA and non-VA providers. And so those are some of the steps that we're going to take. The idea that you just highlighted in terms of the Fermi Lab effort, I'm going to take that and talk to our team about that. There is a whole range of programming that we have through our education programming to train in high demand job areas. And so your idea of ensuring that we do that as it relates to mental health and medical professionals generally is a good one. And I'll make sure that we're back in touch with you on that.
Well, I'm certainly really pleased to hear that. And Mr. Secretary, one last question. We know that there are 2 million women veterans in our country. It's the fastest growing group of veterans, and we're expanding gender-specific care, but I want to make sure that pregnant veterans receive the high-quality maternal health care and support that they need, particularly given that our country leads the world in maternal mortality. And so we have a bipartisan Protecting Moms Who Served Act to support the VA's maternal care coordination programs and to commission the first ever comprehensive study of maternal mortality, morbidity, and disparities among women veterans. And so I hope that you can commit to working with me on policies like that introduced in this Protecting Moms Who Served Act to save moms' lives and eliminate disparities in maternal health outcomes.
I'm eager to commit to do that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Underwood. Who am I calling? Mr. Nels. I recognize Mr. Nels for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Takano. What an honor to be here. And Mr. Secretary, congratulations on being the secretary over such an important area. Our veterans, taking care of our veterans. I had a conversation with you a few weeks ago, and I believe you stated, this is probably one of the greatest honors you could have ever received, to be the secretary, over veterans. And so I truly believe you're going to do a fantastic job. I believe your heart is in the right place, and I'm honored to serve on this Veterans Affairs Committee. And earlier, just a few, Chair Luria, she is the chairwoman over DAMA, and I am the ranking member. And she mentioned a little bit, we had a hearing last week with the VA, and they were talking about these, we had a casual conversation about all of these disability exams, the backlogs, and the VA said that they're going to do everything they can. The goal and objective is to reduce these backlogs to 140,000 by the end of the fiscal year. And I share the same concern as she is, because there really didn't seem to be a written plan. Now, I'm not here to make things difficult for anybody, but if you could really look into that issue and to make sure that there is a written plan and share that with Chairwoman Luria, so we can make some informed decisions. I think that would be a step in the right direction. But I want to congratulate you on your appointment, and what a great honor it is. What a great honor.
Well, I thank you, Mr. Nels. Well, I really enjoyed our conversation, and we agreed to disagree on one thing, which is the Packers and the Vikings. But as a general matter, I think we agree on the fundamental honor it is to serve in this job and to work together. I will tell you, I will absolutely be back in touch with Representative Luria and with you on the question of a written plan. I'm hopeful that the document that I saw and signed sometime in the last week, it all runs together, begins to answer that. But if it doesn't, then I'll continue to work with you on it. I think that, as I said in my opening statement, I respect and appreciate the role that you play here, and the free flow of information among us and ideas among us is critical to our success, and ultimately critical, most importantly, to the vets getting what they've earned.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to finish with this. I'm going to be leaving in just a few minutes. I have a funeral to go to. A veteran, 80 years old, was my senior advisor at the sheriff's office. He was an old Army officer. And so we have his funeral here in a few minutes. And he asked, his wishes were to be laid to rest at the Houston National Cemetery. He wasn't being cremated. He's not being cremated. And then I get notification from that family that there's a 2-week backlog. So this gentleman's going to have to be, I guess, sitting in this funeral home for 2 weeks until the Houston National Cemetery can, I guess, catch up. I'm assuming it's related to COVID. I don't know, but I'm going to be looking into it. I just want to make sure that, if there is an issue at the Houston National Cemetery, I think that, somebody should be sending this information up the flagpole, because a 2-week delay. I mean, this gentleman isn't being cremated. He's going to be sitting in a funeral home for 2 weeks. So anyway, I thank you, and I look forward to working with you. And God bless you on this assignment. And I know you're going to do great things, and you'll be in the history book, sir.
Thanks very much. You have my cell phone number, so whatever you learn today, please call me. And my hunch is it has to do with access to records at the NPRC, which we've discussed here. But if it's something else, please let me know. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nels. I now recognize Ms. Frankel for 5 minutes. Ms. Frankel?
Yes, hi, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Congratulations, good luck. And I want to talk to you about student centers, which are not under the auspices of your department or the Veterans Administration, but coordination with and cooperation with is very important for their success. And these are centers that are on college campuses that help veterans transition from the military into school life, and it smooths it out. There are, as you may know this, about 60% of veterans go to college now, and there are about 750,000 student veterans on 1,500 campuses. And I learned this yesterday from the Student Veterans of America, which is a great organization. If you have not met with them, I would suggest that you do so. You probably have. But one thing they told me is that 90% of post-military jobs are now different than what they had in the military. So that's why going to college or vocational school is so important. One of the things they did tell me that I thought was quite eye-opening is that these student centers, they increase the veterans who go or have access to them. It increases graduation by 10%. And if the college itself has an orientation to let veterans know about that, that's about a 14% increase in graduation. And when you look at the amount of money we pay for the GI bills, something like $13 billion last year, think about it, the savings, well over $1 billion, almost over $2 billion saved by having veterans go to these centers. So one of the things that I did hear in talking to these veterans, is that a request to have really good cooperation especially with the local VAs in their area, because coordinating health services for the veterans is very, very important. So I don't know whether, I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know whether you're familiar. Have you been to a center, or could you go to the center and see what they're about?
Yeah, so I am familiar with the centers. I'm planning to go to one on a trip I'm taking in about 3 weeks. I'm also very familiar with the Student Veterans Association, and I spoke at their conference, but as importantly, several of their alumni now work for the VA, including in a bunch of positions that I rely on directly. And so I'm familiar with it. I think it's a really good idea. I look forward to learning more about it. And I will just say that the now generations and generations of veterans and their kids and grandkids are on a much different path as a result of different iterations of the GI Bill. And I just think it's one of the great iterations that has just paid dividends for the country over time. I'm very proud of the programming here on that, and I'll look forward to working with you and with the committee and ensuring that we make maximum use of that effort to continue to tap this enormous human resource that is our veterans.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Frankel. I now recognize Mr. Mann for 5 minutes. Mr. Mann?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Takano. Mr. Secretary, during yesterday's Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee hearing, it became apparent that the VA doesn't have a true end-to-end medical supply chain. One of the major IT programs is new supply chain management software. That would be beneficial to have, but it won't automatically create a complete supply chain with all the different, with visibility and connections to all the different silos. How will you make sure the VA properly addresses the root causes and we don't spend billions of dollars on IT systems that don't solve the underlying issues in the supply chain?
Yeah, thanks very much. I actually read a bunch of the record from your hearing. I thought it was really meaty and really helpful, and so I appreciate your having had that hearing. One, two is I think that as every healthcare system in the pandemic, we really struggled in the early days on our supply chain in the VA in the pandemic. And I think the reason I raise it is because I think the experience of it both makes your point and also suggests a really clear path forward here because of the beauty of being an integrated system and the necessity of improving cooperation and coordination and communication across VISNs because of the dramatic increase in demand on things like PPE as a result of the pandemic. And because of our ability to use some predictive analytic tools to get our hands around what to expect and where to expect it, I think we began to see the system begin to function like a well-integrated medical system. And so I feel much more confident about the overlay of something like DIMLS, which I think you're referring to, and using that proven logistics system that coming from DoD based on the experience of the pandemic. I feel much more confident that that experience informs our ability to use DIMLS effectively. But the other thing that's going to be required there is really aggressive oversight from you all of the type that I saw, I saw, up close and personal, at least in the written testimony yesterday that you guys conducted. And my commitment to you is, I recognize precisely the point you're making, which is the best software in the world won't make a broken system fixed.
That's right.
One, and two is your oversight on that is going to be critically important. So I'll stay in very close touch with you and be transparent with you on what we're learning.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, please do. That certainly I think is a priority for everybody. Yeah. Moving forward. Second question, Mr. Secretary, one of the most common barriers that we are hearing about when it comes to ending veteran homelessness, which is an issue I care a lot about, is the lack of affordable housing. Advocates believe the economic downturn associated with COVID is going to worsen that problem. Would you support a bill to reauthorize a previous program that allowed the VA to rent, lease, or sell properties that the department has acquired as a result of defaulted VA home loans, specifically to homelessness providers and public housing authorities, to help increase the supply and thus, lower our homelessness among veterans?
It sounds logically very. It sounds logically like the right answer, but let me, rather than give you a commitment right now, let me take and study it and be back in touch with you in short order on the question. I'm in active discussions right now with Secretary Fudge at HUD about our efforts, and obviously with the White House and labor and education and Treasury, ensuring that we have interagency coordination on all these questions. But on your specific question, let me take and study that and get you an answer forthwith.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. I now recognize Ms. Slotkin for 5 minutes. Ms. Slotkin?
Thank you. Hello, Secretary McDonough. Great to have you in front of us. And I was thrilled when you were nominated and confirmed, because you are a real doer, and the VA needs a doer, and a doer with a heart. So I'm glad to have you in that seat. I have a number of questions. This is my first time on the committee. I was struck when I became a member of Congress, just everyone in my district talking about veteran suicide, and not, Iraq, Afghanistan veterans only, but really a ton of Vietnam veterans in their older years committing suicide. I went back and looked at the data on your website, and it appears that Michigan has a very, very high veteran suicide rate. Between 2016 and 2018, we increased our suicide rate by 7.2%, whereas nationwide for vets, it was only an increase of 2%. So I guess the thing I would ask you is, just as my colleague, Representative Bergman, invited you to Michigan, we'd love to have you come to those states that are having a particular problem with suicide. There's a lot of compounding factors. Do some listening sessions, come and talk to our veteran resource centers, and try to tackle the problem where it's most acute.
Count on that, happily.
Thank you. And we'll take you to a football game. We got better teams downstate than he has in the UP. The other thing I would say is, I think my guess is part of the reason we have higher rates of suicide is we have a real problem connecting veterans to services that they qualify for, that are available to them. They just don't know about it. I hear it from everybody. People want to know, how come I can't get lists of veterans to reach out to them? How come there's this disconnect? Some of it's like no marketing budget for the VA programs, right? They can't market what they do, but some of it is just a disconnect and not allowing us to have access to that veteran information. Is there anything you can do very briefly to help us get people to the programs that already exist?
This is the holy grail, I think, Congresswoman, and we're trying a lot of different things. We're looking at a pretty innovative effort whereby as we are getting vets to come in for the vaccine, or as we're going to them, homeless vets, to get them the vaccine, or now that you've expanded the authorities, as we have new vets who maybe for the first time are going to say, oh, wait a minute, I do need the vaccine, that we're going to take that target of opportunity, including the fact that after you get the vaccination, you need to sit still for 15 minutes to make sure that we go talk to them during that period. We're having some success in that in some of the VISNs, but that's an example of the kind of thing we're trying to think about, because we believe better participation in the VA is the answer to a lot of the challenges. It increases the demands on us, as the chairman suggests, but I think that's the big challenge for us. And if we fix that, then I think we'll fix a lot of these other problems.
Yeah, so great. I'm glad you have attention to that, because there just seems to be this massive disconnect that doesn't need to be there. Moving on to something else, here in my town, we have one of the two big federal veteran cemeteries in the state of Michigan. It's the 7th busiest in the country, Great Lakes National Cemetery. And I keep hearing about how the funeral and burial benefits for our veterans are not enough to cover the costs of actually being buried. I think the amount of money is up to $2,000 that you get as a funeral and burial benefit, but a funeral and burial with embalming and all other things can be up to $5,000. So if you could commit to just looking at that privilege and making sure it's kept up with inflation and all those other things, that would be a big help.
Yes, I will absolutely do that.
And then lastly, I was a CIA officer, served 3 tours in Iraq. I remember very clearly living very close to a burn pit and this issue of toxic exposure. I know the chairman is focused on this issue, but I keep hearing these wrenching stories of people they have cancer, they have some sort of problem, and they are fighting the VA to get the test they need at the exact same moment that they're fighting for their life. It is horrible. And so this idea that there is not enough research on what toxic exposure has done to our veterans, I beg you to either get the research funded, will help you, or please allow for those pre-existing conditions, to be listed so that folks don't have to fight the system just to get a basic test.
Yeah, I'll say 2 things. One, in direct response to this, and I want to go back to one other thing. I agree with the sentiment of the question, Congresswoman. 1, 2 is we're not going to wait for this to come to us. We're going to go get it because I think the logic of it is powerful. 3 is we do, and this goes to your first question too, we do have a trust question with the VA where people do feel like they have to fight to get heard. And how we fix that in the EACHs, including on toxic exposure, will help us fix this bigger problem of getting more people in the system. The last thing, and I know, given your history and your own family, part of getting more vets in the system is making better use of the transition out of the TAP program and other programs on the transition out of active duty. And so I know that you don't, but I know Representative Lurie and other members sit on the Armed Services Committee. And so I think you all helping us think through how to make better use of that to make sure that we're getting people connected to one another, connected to the VA, is going to go a long way.
Great.
But I'm not trying to dodge you on the toxic exposure. It is a massive issue. We are dedicating time and resource to it, and we got to do it right.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Ms. Lotkin. I now recognize Mr. Rosendale for 5 minutes. Mr. Rosendale.
Thank you, Chairman Takano and Ranking Member Bost. Secretary McDonough, thank you for joining us today. It is imperative our committee is working together with the Department of Veterans Affairs to ensure that we are effectively serving our nation's veterans. My time is limited, so I'm going to dive right into my questions. Mr. Secretary, do you believe that the electronic health record modernization program can still be completed and fully operational in 2028 and for the $16.1 billion?
I do.
Okay, we're marking that down. Mr. Secretary, do you agree that the right course of action at this point is to focus on quality and functionality with payments tied to completed metrics and the schedule adjusted accordingly?
I think I do. I don't entirely understand the second part of the question, but yes, I do think we should continue to measure progress. The progress should measure functionality, i.e., is the system giving us what we need, which is a better, more comprehensive, easy look at the experience of the veteran himself or herself. And we should continue to measure that. Yes, I agree with all that.
Well, and what I mean by the metrics is are they achieving certain benchmarks, and then should the compensation for that, as far as dealing with Cerner, to the compensation be measured there?
I see. You're saying should we implement a basically pay for performance contract with Cerner? In as much as this is a specific contract question, I guess I want to be a little. I want to be a little dodgy here. I don't expressly know the contract provisions, but I can tell you that if our review shows anything to suggest that the current deployment of the system or the contract requires us to move forward, even if our practitioners are not able to use it to help vets, or it's not increasing outcomes for our vets, then I'll be the first one back up there to say that this thing is not working. We need to relook the whole thing. I don't think that's what we're going to find, but if we do find that, then I'm going to be the first one up there to say to you, this is not working, and we need to revisit the whole kit and caboodle.
Okay, well, I'm just saying when we have timeframes that have been delayed over and over again, where they have not met those benchmarks, in the world that I live in, you don't get compensated for a job that has not been completed. And so what I'm asking is that if we set these metrics, should not we be setting the metrics and awarding the compensation if those benchmarks are hit?
Yeah, look, I mean, I totally agree with the idea that we should pay for performance, and I think that should go to how we procure technology in the United States government. I just don't know. I've not looked at the specific contract here, and I don't want to get in any trouble with the lawyers on it. But the concept, you're from Montana, I'm from Minnesota. That concept sounds right to me.
Okay, very good. It's my understanding that under the current regulations, the VA is prohibited from providing abortion services and abortion counseling. Is that correct?
That is correct. Under current regulations, that is correct.
And could you please answer me, yes or no? Do you have any plans to alter or change this policy under the Biden administration?
Do I have any plans? No, but is it available for us to change that? Yes. And I think, as your question suggests, you also believe that this is a regulatory matter. If we do choose to change it, changing it would be require public rulemaking and public comment. And in all cases, if I were to make that decision, I would do it in full light of day and transparently talking about this with you and the committee. But I have not begun any deliberation on that. And if I did, I'd surely make sure that you're aware of it.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chair, I'll yield back the remainder of my time there.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. I recognize Mr. Sablan for 5 minutes. Mr. Sablan?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chairman Takano. It's been a long night for me. I just got off our Ed and Labor hearing. Mr. Secretary, congratulations on your confirmation and on your becoming Secretary of the Department. I'm going to ask this question, and if you don't have an answer, maybe get back to us. But Congresswoman Radwagon and I wrote to you asking about the department's plans to vaccinate veterans and VA staff in our district. That would be Northern Marianas and American Samoa. The VA is one of 5 federal entities receiving COVID-19 vaccine allocations to vaccinate their population, but we do not know if the department has provided vaccinations in our areas. We understand our local public health centers have used some of their allocation to vaccinate veterans and VA staff with VA's assurance that their supply will be adjusted accordingly. We're unaware that the replenishment has been as occurred. We ask that you ensure the department moves quickly to vaccinate veterans and VHA staff in our districts, and that the vaccine supplies utilized by public health centers for this purpose are promptly restored.
I think it's a reasonable request, and I'll take that. You have my commitment on that, and I'll take that to find out if the replenishment has happened. I'm under the impression that it has, but I'll find out to be certain on that question.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that commitment. The comprehensive assistance to family caregivers is not available in my district, the Northern Mariana Islands, because there is no VA staff to conduct home visits and provide support services. However, many aspects of the application process and ongoing monitoring can be done online by phone or video applications. So only the initial home care assessments and possibly the annual reassessment require VA staff to visit the veteran's home. However, to reduce the risk of exposure and transmission of COVID-19, the department is now allowing all home visits to be done by video conference or other telehealth modalities for the duration of the national emergency. If home visits are not required, the lack of VA staff should not be a barrier to staff to access, Mr. Secretary. Would you consider extending this flexibility beyond the pandemic to allow veterans in areas like my district to access the comprehensive assistance to family caregiver programs? This is a place where you only have 2 staff, Mr. Secretary. We don't have a CBOC, you have a fee-based clinic. And veterans are really being denied of these services they are eligible for.
Thank you for raising it. I do think we need to make sure that we take a comprehensive look at all lessons learned from the use of telehealth during the pandemic to make sure that we establish that as the new floor and then grow off of that as it relates to looking specifically at whether the continued flexibility to use telehealth platforms for home visits in and around the caregiver program. It seems to me to be a reasonable question consistent with that. And so I'm happy to make the commitment to you that we will look into that and we'll make sure that we come back to you with our answers on it.
Right, thank you. And your Hawaii regional office would be very helpful to you. In February, Mr. Secretary, my staff was briefed on the department's plan for implementing the VA healthcare expansion report language in the VA's fiscal year 21 appropriations. The language directs VA to increase access to direct VA care for veterans living in remote and underserved areas such as the Marianas, and strongly urges an increase of the number of full-time dedicated VA medical and mental health providers in those areas. In response, Dr. Adam Robinson, the director of VA Pacific Islands Healthcare Center, proposed to hire a primary care doctor or advanced practitioner who would travel to the islands of Tinian and Rota to see veterans and to build up and strengthen telehealth services in the area, to hire a psychologist or a licensed clinical social worker to provide psychology coverage. I was encouraged to hear of Dr. Robinson's response and his commitment to making this happen in 2021. I ask you for your support of Dr. Robinson's efforts, and this is an effort that sometimes starts and then with the change of personnel just goes away again, and it starts and goes away, and we don't have, we have again a nurse and an administrative personnel in my district, Secretary. We need your attention as much as possible.
I will make sure that I follow up with Dr. Robinson on this. And I think you're right to feel that if you're speaking to Dr. Robinson, that you're speaking to the department. So let me follow up with him. And I think what you're asking is a reasonable question.
Mr. Secretary, my time is up, but thank you very much. And I really look forward to working with you as much as we can to improve VA services in the Northern Marianas.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are you back, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Saban. Half a day. I know you've been up all night.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Trone, I recognize you for 5 minutes for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary McDonough, thanks again for joining us today, and congratulations on your confirmation. We're looking forward to working with you on improving outcomes for our vets. One of my biggest priorities is improving access to mental health care and ending the addiction crisis. As you know, these are twin issues that are taking a particularly hefty toll right now on our veterans. Interagency collaboration is key in solving these most complex issues that face our vets. We recently introduced a bipartisan bill, the Behavioral Health Coordination and Communications Act, to address the challenges posed by the federal agencies working on mental health and substance use disorder that are siloed often. by establishing interagency communication across the VA. How currently is the VA working together with other agencies to improve access to mental health?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I agree with you, Mr. Trone, that interagency coordination is vital here. We do have a series of interagency coordinating mechanisms to allow for VA, for example, to work very closely on the issue in particular that you raise with SAMHSA at HHS. And the best, in my view, in my experience, the best interagency coordination comes through efforts chaired and driven by the White House. And we have some of that here too. For example, with the Prevents Task Force. But at the end of the day, as vital as the interagency communication and coordination is, exactly what that looks like for us going forward is going to be driven by outcomes. As I've said, every decision will be informed by whether the decision is increasing access for vets and increasing and arriving at better outcomes for vets. That's how we'll be looking at substance use disorder. That's how we'll be looking at mental health more generally.
Yeah, we certainly agree on the outcome focused. Think about telehealth a second. It's been really beneficial providing care during the pandemic. And Mr. Secretary, you recently said the demand for telemental health is going up. You mentioned that reduced stigma is playing a role in the increased demand for these services. What should we be doing here in Congress to continue lowering the stigma associated with seeking mental health care?
Well, yeah, thanks for that comment about what I had said. And what I said is the part of this massive expansion of telehealth, the 1,700% increase that I talked about, is uptake on the mental health platforms. And some of that may have to do, as I said, hopefully with reduced stigma. It also may have to do with the fact that somebody on a telehealth platform can access those kinds of activities and that kind of support without having, for example, to go into a med center and go to a particular wing. And so the privacy that the telehealth platform affords us may also be a really important innovation. This is why it's so critical that we establish now, this pandemic period and the dramatic expansion of telehealth as the new floor. And then we take that to even higher heights. So what can you do? You can continue to help us as you have in the American Rescue Plan with additional resources for telehealth platforms. And then you can continue to talk publicly about this question of seeking mental health care is as normal and as expected as seeking care for your the rest of your whole health. And so the more we talk about that, the more we model that, the better, in my view.
We're definitely in vehement agreement on that. Just quickly, many of our vets and haven't been to the VA in over 2 years, then pass away with suicide. We all agree, I know, that that's unacceptable way to fail our vets in an irreparable way. Is it difficulty reaching these at-need vets primarily a VA capacity of workforce issue? Is it an outreach issue, access, or something else? You could shed some light on your overall plan to help these vets.
Yeah, so when you think about the 19.5 million vets, or give or take, that we have in the country, let's say 6.4 million of them rely on us entirely for the healthcare. So we're in really good communication with them. They're in and out of our medical centers, CBOCs. The other say up to 9.5 million are enrolled with us, but are not constantly seeking care. But they're roughly aware of the services that are available to them. And it's a question of us then, it may be that they have options at other places. The real trick for us is finding the delta between that 9 and the 19. So that 10 million vets who, for whatever reason, either they're not aware of the capacities, they've not been that are available to them, that we have not been in touch with them, or we didn't do a good job during their TAP or their kind of transition out of active duty. We just have to, we have to do better on all fronts, because what we know is the likelier it is that a vet is in VA care, the likelier the better outcomes that vet is experiencing. And so the real challenge for us is just getting them into the system, just as Congresswoman Slotnick was saying, which is we have to get better at getting our vets into our care.
Okay, thank you, sir. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trone. Dr. Miller Meeks, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair Takano. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being with us today. I was very pleased in your early testimony that you mentioned the Vet Tech program, and I'm planning to introduce a bill with Representative Kai Kalehi, who is also a military veteran, that would expand funding for the popular Vet Tech program that trains and places veterans into employment in the IT sector. While the funding for this program was recently increased and it is a pilot program, I've been told by your staff that funding will soon run out again because it is so popular. Would you support legislation to increase funding to $125 million a year, which is the number your staff has told us is necessary to keep up with the demand? And if so, why or why not?
So the short answer is I do support increased funding on the specific number. I'd like to get back to you. But the fact of the demand is, again, is good evidence here that that the program is working. But again, I want to make sure that we're getting out of only measuring the inputs, i.e. what we invest in, and making sure that we're also measuring outcomes. And so what I'd like to do is just take the question and make sure that I can come back to you consistent with that philosophy to make sure that we're not asking for money that is not proven to be working, notwithstanding the demand, by the way, which is obviously the first most important signal. But I want to make sure that I want to make sure I'm staying true to my philosophy.
Well, I appreciate your dedication to being a good fiduciary of the taxpayers' money. We too have similar thoughts. I'm a member of the Wapello County Board of Veterans Commission, and it is a very popular program. Yeah. And my understanding is that in its short life, that there are already 1,500 veterans who have secured jobs of an average of $62,000 a year, which, given the short-term training and the benefits, I think that it has for mental health, as we've talked about, are exceptional. Yeah. So is that also your understanding of the number of?
It is my understanding, and among the various pilots that we're testing right now, it is among the highest performers. So there's no question about that.
Thank you so much. I also appreciate the Veterans Administration guidance for a claims processor to reschedule a disability exam if the veteran has been a no-show. Being a physician, I know how costly no-shows are to your clinic and to your schedule and to the backlog. And we know that that the backlog increased during the pandemic, which is understandable. On Tuesday's DAMA meeting subcommittee hearing, the VFW reported that in some cases, contract vendors don't have accurate information for the veterans to contact them, which causes them to miss exams. As a result, the exam inventory increases even greater than what one would anticipate during the pandemic. And the examination has to be rescheduled or reordered, and they have difficulties contacting the veteran. Is Vet Text, which is the VAHA's administration text appointment reminder system, is that available for disabilities exam? And is the VA working with the vendors to expand this capability to contract disability exams and reach veterans?
It's an excellent question, and as I understand it, it's currently not available for exams, but given the success in its use for scheduling on vaccinations, we are looking at expanding it. So let me take that one for action and come back to you on it.
Yep, that would be great. It was a question I had asked in how we can reach more veterans and reschedule. So this is important to get through the backlog, but more importantly, to meet those veterans' needs, get these disability exams scheduled, and it makes it better for both the VA hospital system and those contract vendors that you have throughout that process.
Agree.
If I have a little bit more time, Chair Takano, I have one more brief question. Okay, your testimony that the CDC estimates that more than 40% of American adults have delayed or deferred care during the pandemic. I've seen this as a physician, and we warned about this. The VA has been a longtime leader in telehealth, as you've already mentioned earlier. And honestly, the VA, I think, was better equipped than many in the healthcare industry to transition care to virtual mediums over the last year. Given that, what percentage of enrolled veterans have delayed or deferred care from the VA over the last year? And what are you doing to safely re-engage them in care now?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So that I don't know, I don't have the data sliced that way, so I can get it sliced for you that way. What we know is there's 20 million individual appointments that were changed or delayed. In about 96% of those cases, we've been in touch with the individual vet to make sure that we've found a way to address that the delayed appointment or concern. And in fact, actually performance on emergent care during the course of the pandemic has kind of even outperformed performance pre-pandemic. I think we were able to get emergent cases addressed within something less than a day and a half, which is, I think, pretty high performance. The thing that we're worried about, and which we don't have a good handle on a specific number, it is a version of the CDC number, but the number of vets who just forewent a checkup or something that we weren't able to, that wasn't scheduled in the first instance. So they didn't follow through on it. And so that's why the flexibility that comes with the ARP money is so critical to us. But we've chopped this data up a couple of different ways. So let me make sure we come back to you in a way that helps you get your head around the way we have tried to get our head around how big this lump of care coming through the system could look like in the kind of the bands of what we expect.
Thank you very much for that answer, and I would appreciate your getting back with you. Thank you very much, Chair Takano, for your patience, and I yield back my time.
Thank you, Dr. Miller-Meeks. Now call on Mr. Gallego for 5 minutes.
Secretary McDonough, thank you for being here. The coronavirus pandemic has put many more Americans in danger of homelessness, including, of course, veterans, as you know. Congress passed $2 billion in spending this year to combat veteran homelessness, and we passed the American Rescue Plan in this committee to aid in that effort. Mr. Secretary, can you expand on how the American Rescue Plan and the money appropriated by Congress will help the department fight veteran homelessness?
Yeah, thanks very much. So, and the investments have been both in the base, in CARES, and now in the American Rescue Plan. Congress has been exceedingly helpful in ensuring we have the resources. Among the things that it has allowed us to do to date are making sure that at-risk vets get support to stay where they are through rental assistance, making sure that we put a moratorium on evictions or foreclosures, and we get them emergency mortgage support or emergency support for their utility bills. So that programming can continue. The second thing it can do is, this goes to address, I think one of the things that, I forget if it was, I think it was Mr. Murphy, if I'm not mistaken, but mentioned that a big challenge we face still relates to availability of affordable housing. So the HUD-VASH program is a big part of our ability to address that. And so funding here, both for us and for HUD in this example, or in this area, allows us to make sure that the vouchers are substantial enough to allow us to address in the high price markets those costs. Lastly, it has allowed us to get care, including mental health care, substance abuse treatment, to both at-risk and homeless vets, including, for example, through the provision of mobile telephony, so that homeless vets are in touch with care providers in the context of the pandemic. And so those are a couple of examples of it, Mr. Gallego. I, like you, intuit that the situation must have gotten worse during the course of the pandemic. But because of the way, and this is another data thing, like I love the annual PIT count, and I'm really glad to participate in it, as I have many, many times over the years. But we have to get better and more actionable information about the nature of the homelessness challenge for our vets. And we're trying to scope that more aggressively.
And is there a amount that you guys, so we allocated some flexibility in this, $14.5 billion more for the department. Is there a amount you're thinking about that you're going to dedicate of that towards homelessness or dealing with homelessness?
Yeah, the number that's sticking in my mind is between 600 and 700 million, Mr. Gallego. But let me take that and get back to you with precision about it, because I want to make sure I'm not giving you.
And that's 600 to 700 million above the original 1.9 billion. Correct.
Exactly
so,
right. Exactly.
Perfect.
So that's additive to the base budget, the CARES money, and the ARP money. Then on
got
top
it. And then what other elements of the American Rescue Plan more broadly will help the department fight veterans homelessness? So I understand the VASH voucher. Wait.
Yeah. Obviously, the support to increased care. When we think about somebody in a situation where as I said earlier, we know that in earlier periods of softness in the economy, weakness in the economy, and vets lose their job and therefore lose their employer-covered healthcare insurance, we see demand for VA services, VHA services increase in those scenarios as well. And so that is going to be part of this increase in overall care requirements that come from people during the pandemic for whatever reason, including, by the way, homelessness, who have foregone care in the system, therefore meaning that they may come back with bigger, more complicated issues for us to address.
Great. Thank you. And I yield back my time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gallego. I now call on Ms. Capter for 5 minutes. Ms. Capter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Bose. Thank you so much. Mr. Secretary, we don't want to wear you out. Seems like you're holding up pretty well there. Congratulations on your appointment. We're very proud of you and your service to our country. The first couple questions just are simple questions relating to data and staffers at the VA that we can work with. Number one, on any given day at the VA, what percentage of beds across the entire system of hospitals and healthcare facilities are occupied by vets who present with behavioral health conditions, including neuropsychiatric and PTS? And what percentage of that have some type of addiction? That's number one. So I'm looking for data. Number two, in my home community, we have a food bank that gives a great deal of support to veterans who have a given day they come to the food bank. And the food bank is interested in now working with veterans to begin to grow vegetables and to produce food for these individuals. Who at the VA could we talk to? A social worker, a project director, some regional person who could help us put that together well? Number three, my fundamental question is, across our country, we know that in the field of neuropsychiatry and behavioral sciences, we are 100,000 doctors short. I was just confronted by a constituent today who was not a veteran, but can't get care. And they can't get care because there aren't doctors who specialize in these conditions. With 100,000 doctors, physicians who are behavioral specialists and psychiatrists lacking across our country, and probably 4 times that many advanced practice nurses who would specialize in these fields. How can we use the power of the VA, the power of the Department of Defense, the power of the Department of Health and Human Services to begin to draw perhaps from the DoD Medical Corps as people are discharged or as they're thinking about what they're going to do with their lives, develop a more smooth platform to help to educate and advance individuals who would be very good at being physicians and advanced practice nurses in these fields, but somehow they slip through the cracks. I would very much appreciate your ideas on that. You don't have to answer now if you don't want to, because it's a big question, but we know we have to solve this problem. I've even thought of helping to pay for people's education, and then as a federal government, and then allowing them to work both on the veteran side and on the civilian side, because we lack these doctors on the civilian side as well. And then I forgot one thing. We are working with our governor here in Ohio to remodel a 2nd floor of a psychiatric hospital that's a forensic hospital. It's a miserable place. Again, we lack doctors, we lack the proper care for these individuals. At least upwards of 1/3 or more of the people in the jails around Ohio are mentally ill. So we're failing as a country. That's a failing grade. We just can't seem to get it right. But in Ohio, with the psychiatric hospital, and we're going to put money into this for the state, could we build a wing on the back that might accommodate some of our vets who need shelter plus care? Who could we talk to at the VA about working with our state, working with our locality, knowing the small number of doctors we actually have? I really need your help. You have the kind of background that could help us figure this out. And not just at the VA, but there are other things we can do at HHS and in other departments, including DoD, to make a real difference. So just sort of respond in general on that one. And if you could get somebody back to us on the shelter plus care for vets who simply can't make it on the street.
Yeah. So on your first question, I don't have the data cut by percentage of beds any night, and I'll get that for you. The one piece of this that one piece of data that may help is over the last year, FY20, we saw 1.56 million vets sought mental health care services in VHA. Okay, 1.56 million. So that's 1/4 of the vets who seek overall care in the VA system, right? Or strike that, who rely on the VA for all their care, right?
Thank you.
So that's one way to cut it, but let me cut the data another way to get back to you on the percentage of beds any given night.
Thank you.
Second, on the kind of integrated services, I think I know the right person to talk to, and I emailed with him not last night at 11:30, but his name is escaping me at the moment. So I will follow up with your office.
I know how that happens.
Tonight or tomorrow. The last is on your point on we have a strategic shortage in the country of mental health professionals.
Yes.
The universities say this, private hospitals say this, DoD says this, and we experience it in VA. And we are getting very good at creative and innovative ways that individual med center directors and individual mental health professionals are helping us by being super nimble and agile. So we have mental health professionals that work in the VA and in the university setting, but we just have to train more.
Yes.
And VA has a great history. In fact, Dr. Murphy himself said some of his training was at a VA facility as a surgeon. So we are looking at ways to expand and grow on the historic and I mean historic by meaning historical, as well as historic VA commitment to medical center educational alliances that go back to General Bradley in the earliest days of the VA. And the question for us is, how do we expand that even more?
Yes.
And so we're looking at that question too, Ms. Captor. I don't have a specific set of answers to that question yet. But one of the meetings that's actually happening right now, and that if I do finish, I'll be able to go join them, is with our mental health professionals across the VA system on what they're doing to highlight this need and to grow capacity to fill the need. And so I'll be able to follow up with you on that too. So the long and short of it is, I think you're absolutely right. In previous years, previous crises, when we faced shortages of linguists, when we faced shortages of technologists, DOD, VA, and our funding, and HHS and our funding ends up being important to filling that. And I think you're right to think it is an opportunity for us to do it now too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Captor. Thank you, Congresswoman Captor. And I thank you for asking questions about expanding our reach in terms of medical residencies. And with that, we have our very own Dr. Ruiz for 5 minutes. Doctor.
Thank you, Chair Takano. And thank you, Mr. Secretary. It's so great to see you again. And it's so great to see you in this capacity. We have such high hopes in all the good work that you're going to do. I'm actually wearing my white coat just to give everybody context, because I'm having hope in action here with President Biden's federal retail pharmacy program, inoculating over 1,000 of our hardest to reach community members, farm workers at Desert Mirage High School in the Eastern Coachella Valley. It's working, so please send my regards and my immense gratitude on the focus on equity. As an emergency medicine physician and representative of a large veteran population, I'm committed to ensuring our service members receive the highest quality healthcare possible. Over the years, I have been especially focused on making sure that veterans that have been exposed to toxic burn pits get the benefits and care that they need. I actually founded the bipartisan Burn Pits Caucus in Congress. Burn pit exposure is this generation's Agent Orange, and it continues to threaten the health of service members and veterans, many of whom become severely sick, permanently disabled, or die from respiratory failure, cancers, and autoimmune diseases due to their burn pits exposures. I was introduced to the effects of burn pits when a constituent, Jennifer Kepner, a 39-year-old Air Force veteran with a healthy lifestyle and no other risk factors, came to my office for help. She was battling pancreatic cancer, which her oncologist determined was likely due to exposure to burn pits at Ballard Air Force Base in Iraq. She later died, leaving behind her husband and 2 young children, and has been the inspiration behind my burn pits advocacy. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this issue touches countless families around the country. In fact, President Biden has indicated numerous times that his son Beau Biden's cancer may be related to his exposure to burn pits, also at Ballard Air Force Base during his 2009 service in the Iraq War. It's time to act, Mr. Secretary, and I hope you'll be a partner in taking urgent actions. Veterans in this country need advocates, not obstacles, when seeking the care they deserve. Secretary McDonough, in your testimony, you mentioned that you initiated an internal review of the VA's current process for establishing presumptive of service connections for veterans who may have been exposed to airborne hazards during their military service. Can you elaborate on what that review entails and your plans to work proactively with Congress to address exposure to burn pits and other toxic exposures?
Yeah, thanks very much, Doc, and thank you for doing the vaccine work that you're doing. What I said is in the first meeting of the Veterans Administration Executive Board on Tuesday afternoon, this was the topic: burn pit toxic exposure. We agreed a number of things in that meeting. One is that we would be active rather than waiting for new research. That means that we will seek additional partners, including the National Institutes of Health and National Cancer Institute, organizations like the firefighters who have been exposed to the similar kinds of chemicals and may have access to research and science that will help us in our deliberations. And this is on top of our own research out of VA and in coordination with DOD to figure out precisely what our vets and our active duty have been through.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and I would love to be a very involved, engaged partner in your decisions in creating the process for that. But just to be clear, our veterans are dying right now, and they cannot afford to wait decades for that perfect 20-year longitudinal double cohort study like Vietnam veterans were forced to with Agent Orange. In the next few weeks, I will introduce the presumptive benefits for warfighters exposed to burn pits and other toxins act with Senator Gillibrand. This bill will give veterans who develop respiratory diseases and cancers from toxic exposure the health coverage that they need and deserve by establishing a presumption of service connection. And I look forward to continuing to work with you. We had a medical fellow in my office that did the literature review, identified the respiratory illnesses that have some association with burn pits. We also know that there's carcinogens in the smoke of burn pits, and therefore we have people dying of brain cancer, pancreatic cancer, gastric cancer, all kinds of cancer. This is different than Agent Orange because there's hundreds of toxic chemicals that can produce different array of illnesses. So getting a grasp of this and giving the veterans the care and the benefits that they've earned and deserve is going to be life-saving. And I look forward to being a partner with you personally in establishing this process with the leadership of Chair Takano, who I understand is also very committed to this issue. So thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ruiz. Snazzy coat you have on there, and want to come out to the desert and actually see you put those shots in people's arms.
Hey, come on down. You're more than welcome. It's your county.
All righty. Great neighbor I have. Great neighbors I have. And always great to have a cardinal attend your meetings. And so lovely to have Ms. Capter be a member of our committee and committed to the issue of medical residencies. And I see Secretary McDonough is on that. So I'm already starting before I get into my summary of closing statement, I want to know if there's any other members on the call who have not gone yet and who would like to ask questions. Otherwise, I'll just quickly make my closing statement, which is very brief. I've already made it with regard to my hope to work on medical residencies along. We're going to need to address the increased needs of veterans who will be seeking care at the VA if we go in the direction I think we might be going with regard to toxic exposure. Certainly appreciate all of the questions from both sides of the aisle. It was an impressive hearing of goodwill toward our new secretary. I know we're all looking forward to working with him. And Ms. Capter, I don't think we wore him out. I think the secretary is looking pretty strong. So with that, Ranking Member Boss, do you have anything to say before we close this out?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank the secretary. I know it's been a long meeting. You've answered a tremendous amount of questions. We do look forward to working with you, and thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to having you back many times.
Thank you.
All righty. So I want to thank the secretary again for joining us today on today's hearing on the future of the VA. We have a unique opportunity to reshape VA into an organization that is efficient, effective, and veteran-centric. In order to do this, we have to work together. So I truly appreciate your commitment to your job and to our veterans. All members will have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. Thank you again for appearing before us today, Mr. Secretary, and this hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you.